Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Robin Lowery, and I am here to tell you a little bit about my past and what God has called me to do for my future. So, I don't know how familiar you guys are with Faith Home, but I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about Faith Home. So, as I said in the video, Faith Home is 3 ministries with one mission, which is to share the love of Christ. And so, those ministries include church planting, the clinic, which serves the children and staff of Faith Home. And something that's been really exciting about Faith Home is the clinic is now able to serve people outside of the walls of Faith Home. And so there are General Baptist churches in Faith Home, and the pastors of those churches can make a referral for somebody in their congregation to receive some medical care from our doctor at Faith Home. And that's been a really wonderful ministry we've been able to provide because medical care is a great need in Honduras. And as of right now, they're able to offer those services at no cost to the General Baptist congregations. And then there's the children's home itself. So Faith Home is a 50-acre campus. I have on there that there are 50 children, but they just received 3 new ones, so there's about 53 children on campus right now. And it's just this wonderful place. It offers a family unit, so there are house parents. They call them their aunt and uncle, their tia and tio. It gives them that sense of a feel of what a family should be like. They do devotions together. They sit together when they go to church, and they just do things as a family. It offers medical care. So like I said, there's a clinic on campus, and they receive their basic medical care from there. And then if they need something more extensive, then they do go off campus to receive medical care. But medical care is a huge deal in Honduras as well. The girl that I talked about in the video, I really do mean it. The medical care that she received at the public hospital probably would have led to her death or some very severe consequences if Faith Home hadn't taken her and then taken her to a new doctor to get proper medical treatment. So it's a wonderful blessing for Faith Home to be able to have the clinic on campus and offer that. They have a psychologist on staff. So they're able to give those children some psychological help to help with that healing process from the trauma they've received. And then there's education. So the children in Honduras go off campus to a private school for half of a day. And then there's the school on campus where they receive some additional help the other half of the day. And the greatest part is they receive the love of Christ. So, a little bit about myself. I am from Southern Illinois, a little town called McLeansboro, population 3,000, so most of you probably haven't heard of it, but it's kind of close to Mount Vernon. I've been pretty active in youth ministries, but I wasn't always. So I was saved when I was in junior high, but I didn't really understand what that meant. Other than I knew I accepted Jesus in my heart, and I started praying. But not a whole lot changed about my life at that time. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s, and I started attending my home church, my General Baptist church, that I really got that relational piece. I started getting involved in my Sunday school class, really encouraged to start reading my Bible. And through that, I was able to really grow as a Christian and figure out that there was so much more to it than just that one-time prayer. It was life-changing. And so since then, I volunteered at, Bible school, nursery, or junior church programs, but then got really active in some junior high ministries. We had a Resurgence Youth Conference that we put on for several years, and I started out just volunteering a little bit in the kitchen. Then the next year, I was kind of here, there, and everywhere helping, and then I took on a huge chunk of planning games, and the next year, I made the master schedule, did the games, and a whole lot of other stuff. So God has really grown me throughout all of this, kind of teaching me, helping give me the skills that I will need when I'm in Honduras working with the children at Faith Home. I have one daughter and one granddaughter. That's my granddaughter in the picture. Her name's Emerson, and I feel like I have to show her off because who doesn't like to show off their grandchildren? So she is 11 weeks old. And then I am a special education teacher. So I've taught pre-K. For 8 years, I taught pre-K special education. And I currently teach a 3rd through 5th grade cross-categorical special education classroom with an emphasis on communication. So most of the children in my classroom have autism or some pretty significant communication needs. So that's kind of a little bit about my background. And then how I got involved in missions. One day, some missionaries came and talked at my church. And I was sitting there and listening to them talk about what they do. And I felt a stirring in my heart. And I was like, okay, God wants me to sponsor a child. So I just kind of was praying about it while they were finishing up their talk. And by the time they were done, I was like, I really don't think that's what God wants me to do. So I was a little bit confused. So I went home, and just every now and then it would pop back up, and I'd be like, man, I know I prayed about it. I know I wasn't supposed to sponsor a child. So I was so confused. And finally, one day, it's like a light bulb went off. I'm like, well, maybe I'm supposed to go on a trip, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how you go on a mission trip. And so, again, I'm like, okay, I'll just pray about it. So some more time went on, and I finally worked up the courage to ask my pastor, all right, so what does even a person do if they want to go on a trip? But that same Sunday, before I had a chance to ask, our church announced that they were going on a mission trip to a place called Faith Home in Honduras. So I felt like that was definitely some confirmation about what God had planned for me. So in April of 2017, I went on my first trip to Faith Home. It was a team mostly from my church, and we did some various different projects, mostly on campus. So we were a construction team. They helped work on a bridge. They built a shelter over the generator. My task was kind of sorting some clothes, and then we all helped paint around campus. So we just did some miscellaneous projects. And then we also were able to pass out some rice and beans at one of the local churches. And one day I was just standing outside the team house looking across the campus, and I was like, I could just sell everything and move here. And then I was like, whoa, okay, that's a pretty crazy thought. Don't know where that came from. And I went home from the trip. It was a great experience, but then there'd be times I'd be walking my dog outside, and I'd look at my house, and I'd go, I think I could sell it and move down there. And, of course, again, I kind of shrugged that off like, who does that? That's pretty far out there. But it kept coming back to mind. But the devil was really working. He was like, what are you going to do down there? You're not the greatest Bible scholar. You couldn't teach the Bible to anybody. You're not worth anything down there. They already have everybody they need. There's nothing you could do. But it just kept coming back to my mind. So I decided to talk to the mission coordinator. And he said that there are people who do short-term trips. So I decided, okay, I could do a short-term trip. So, summer of 2018, I joined a team from Kentucky to fly down to Honduras, and I spent the week with them, and we did Bible school, some painting projects again, more sorting clothes, and just some other miscellaneous things around campus. And then when they left, I spent the other 2.5 weeks working on campus. So I helped out in their toddler program. They had a daycare going on, and I spent some time in there. And then in the afternoons, I helped out in their preschool. And in my spare time, again, they have lots of supplies down there that always need organized. And so I organized some more supplies. And during that time, I really was able to get a good sense of, hey, you are needed. There are things you can do. I gave you gifts for a purpose, and it really felt good. So I went back, and I talked to the mission coordinator after my trip, and I was like, you know what? I really do think God's calling me to go there full time. And he said, well, what we like to do with our missionaries is have them visit another mission field before they make that full-time commitment to one mission field. We want to know for sure that they are called to a certain place. So we made plans for me to visit the Philippines. And that was in September. And then I get a text message in January from Christina at Faith Home that said, hey, you know what? We don't really want you to go to the Philippines. We just want you to come back here. Would you be willing to come back here this summer? And so then I talked to the mission coordinator again. I'm like, okay, so here's the thing. You said you want me to visit 2 mission fields before I go full time. I don't want to waste any more time. If you want me to visit a second mission field, I need to go to the Philippines this summer. And he was like, well, we really do that for the younger missionaries, the ones who are, in their 20s and really aren't sure what to do with their life. I was like, okay, thanks. And so he said, we're okay with you going back to Faith Home. So this past summer 2019, I spent 6 weeks at Faith Home. So this summer, one of my roles was to work in their daycare program. And so this was a 3-hour program in the mornings with their 2- and 3-year-old. And it was a really neat time. I took some supplies down with me, and I brought some books into the classroom, some blocks, so just some different learning materials. Because right now, it's just kind of a babysitting service, but it could be so much more. And so while I was working in the classroom, I was really working on certain skills. I was reading to the children, practicing some different motor skills, and the house parents who volunteered were watching me. And one of the most rewarding things was they started doing what I was doing. And that was so exciting to see, because I'm already making a difference, and I've not even been here very long. And so it was really just a confirmation of okay, I could come down here and I could do this, and we can really transform this program to be beneficial to the children. Another one of my roles was in the tutoring program. So in the afternoons, I went back to school, and I was with the kindergarten, first, and second grade students. And in the afternoons, they come to the school on campus, and they get some help with their homework, and they practice their English speaking skills a little bit. And so that was my role, was to help them with their homework and work on their English. And again, that was it was a very neat experience. It sometimes was a little frustrating. I don't know as much Spanish as I need to. Part of my training will be language school. And I would say a few things to them in Spanish, and then they'd speak this big, long sentence and tell me this story, and I'd be like, I have no idea what you just said. And so they'd be like, but you just spoke to me in Spanish. So that was pretty fun. Got some good laughs there. But one great thing about Faith Home is that 25% of youth in Honduras attend their later years in high school. But Faith Home has a 100% graduation rate. So that's pretty awesome. So thanks to their tutoring program that they have, the kids are able to stay in school and keep going. And just one of the thoughts that kept coming back to me while I was in Faith Home was, this is home. It just felt like everyday normal life. I had this peace that surpasses all understanding, and I just knew it's exactly where God wants me to be. It just felt like my school day does here in the States. Get up, get ready for work, go to work, have my lunch break, work some more, go home in the evening. Didn't feel like I was a missionary in a foreign country. Didn't feel like anything majorly grand. It was just life, and I was just at home. And that's exactly what I think God wants. He doesn't want it to feel like this major change in my life. He wants me to feel like I'm exactly where I need to be. And so that was a really great feeling to experience. So everybody wants to know, what will I be doing when I go back full time? So one of my major roles will be a bilingual early stimulation class. So we're going to take that daycare program that they have, and we're going to turn it into more of a preschool type environment, which they call early stimulation. So the first 3 years of a child's life are very critical for learning of all types, but especially cognitive development, language acquisition. So we really want to focus on those things in the early years. And that will include making sure there's appropriate materials in the environment, setting up learning centers so that they just learn those things naturally, bringing in those books, reading to the kids. And we want to make it a bilingual program. So thankfully, our children at Faith Home get to go out to a bilingual private school, which is wonderful, but they don't have any English when they go. So when they get to school and people are speaking English to them, they're kind of starting off a little bit behind. So we want to give them the extra boost of that English language learning when they're toddlers, so that when they go off to the bilingual school, they already have some English language, so that they're getting off on the right foot. Another one of my roles will be teaching English across all ages. So right now, they utilize the Rosetta Stone program to teach a lot of their English. But we want to make it a little bit more personal. So small groups, one-on-one, whatever the student needs, we want to really see what do they know, what do they need to learn next, and give them that good, solid English foundation. Because in Honduras, if you can speak English, you can get a really good job. And so we really want to set our children up at Faith Home to have a successful future. And then my third role as a special educator will be coming up with an educational plan that's individualized for each student. So in Honduras, if you go to their public school and you're struggling in school and they don't think that you're going to make it to graduation, they just tell you don't come back. So then your education is done. Like I said, our children at Faith Home are very fortunate to get to go to a private school. So they do keep our children. And again, we have a 100% graduation rate, which is fantastic. But they still don't offer special education services. Well, a lot of our kids, when they get to us, have had no school at all. They just never went to school. So if they're second grade appropriate, that's where the school sticks them because that's their age, and they don't have any of those foundational skills. And school is a really big struggle for them. Well, we want them to have the best education possible. So my role will be figuring out what do they know, what are the skills they've missed out on, and really help build them up in all areas. Because again, we want them to have a successful future, and we feel like education is a big part of that. So one-on-ones, small groups, we want to boost them up to the best that they can be. Proverbs 22:6 says, direct your children onto the right path, and when they get old, they will not leave it. That's what Faith Home is all about. It has to do with all areas of development. Psychological care, we want them to mentally be healthy. Education, we want to give them the best education possible. Health, we want them to be as healthy as possible. But most importantly, we want them to know who Jesus is and what he can do in their life, and we want him to transform them so that they can make a difference in their country. That's what Faith Home is all about. And so, we want to prepare them for their future. So I've got a couple of pictures here. The girl in the picture is one that I got to work with in the afternoons in the tutoring program. She grew up at Faith Home, and she's now in the transition program. So once they turn 18, they're not allowed to live inside the gates anymore. That's one of the government's rules. But Faith Home doesn't just say, all right, we're done with you, bye. They have a transition program, so they have some houses on the outside of the gates. And part of the rules with that is they either have to continue their education or get a job while they're getting prepared to move out on their own. And a lot of the kids, in turn, sometimes want to give back to Faith Home. And she's one of those. She's so grateful for what Faith Home has done for her that she wants to help with the children in the afternoons in the homework program. And it was just really great to see one of the kids who grew up there. And again, she's so thankful for what Faith Home has done. And then the boy in the picture also grew up at Faith Home. And he's extremely thankful for Faith Home as well. He's involved in a lot of music ministry. He gives music lessons. He takes kids to different churches for youth rallies. He plays music at the church on campus at Faith Home, runs the sound machine. In that picture, he was translating for a Bible school, and he just loves to do it. For the Bible school team, he didn't want anything for it. They offered to pay him, and he said, no, I don't want your money. I just want to give back. So they slipped him some money anyway. But he's just grateful. And then another great thing that he does is he over those transition boys. He's a good role model for them. He mentors them as they're trying to figure out what their next step in life is. So it's just wonderful to see how thankful the kids at Faith Home are for everything that's offered to them, and then they're ready to give back. So, how can you get involved? You can join a team. Different teams go down throughout the year. You don't have to have a whole team from your church. You can join a team from another church. The team from Kentucky probably had 5 or 6 churches represented all together as a team that went down and did Bible school. You can pray. All of the missionaries in all of the different locations need your prayer. It's not the easiest job. And even though for me it felt like home, I know when I'm down there full time, there's definitely going to be some difficulties. I know it's not going to be all rainbows and butterflies all the time. So we definitely need your prayers. You can give. All of the mission fields need financial support. And you can support a missionary, which is one of the reasons I'm here today. So, again, how can you support me? By your prayers. I ask that you consider taking a card today, and on the front of the card is my picture, and it's a reminder to pray for me. Encouragement. I will need lots of encouragement. It is definitely going to be a difficult task to leave my family, go many, many, many miles away, and only get to see them probably about once a year. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be challenges with the children at Faith Home. They experience a lot of trauma before they ever get there, so there are some challenging behaviors and difficult things that we have to help them with, and it's not easy on the missionaries who are there. So we need a lot of encouragement as well. And of course, there's the financial part of it. So all of this program is sponsor funded. So these are also sponsor cards. So when you open it up, on the back of the prayer card side, it just gives a little bit of information about my background and what I will be doing. But the other part of it is the sponsor side. And so on it, it has a box to check that you will pray, a box to check if you want to receive updates, and then it talks about the shares. So each share is $10 a month. And I ask that you will at least pray about maybe what God would be calling you to do, to join in this ministry, maybe through some financial support. It's up to you how many shares. Really, it's up to God. I shouldn't even say it's up to you. It's up to God for what he calls you to do, for how many shares. It may be 1 share. It may be 2 shares at $20 a month. It may be 5 shares at $50 a month. Whatever he calls you to do. And you just send in this little postcard. There's the place for the stamp. You separate the 2 pieces. You mail it into General Baptist, and they'll send you all the information. And there is a spot on there if you want to have auto withdrawal for your support. And that support goes for all of the expenses. It goes for language school, for housing, for insurance, for salary. All of it is covered by those shares from the sponsors. So people always say, well, when are you going to go? Well, I can't go until I'm fully funded. But I feel like God has said he wants me to be fully funded by May. But to get there, I need your help. Because right now, I'm 10% funded. So I need quite a few more shares. So I ask that you at least pray and consider joining in this ministry, because it's not my ministry, it's God's ministry. And this ministry isn't going to work just through me. God has a plan for many people to join in this ministry. And I ask that you at least pray to see if he's asking you to join, and possibly through your financial support. So I pray that let's do together what I cannot do alone, because we want to teach the children at Faith Home to go and make disciples for Christ. Does anybody have any questions for me? So I thought I'd leave some time for some questions. You can ask about Faith Home or about what I will be doing. The total cost for the year, I don't have an exact breakdown. Now, I need 400 shares total, but again, that covers language school, so some of those are one-time costs. So I'm not exactly sure what the breakdown per year would be. Anybody else?
If I was to take a card and look at the shares, does that go directly for your ministry, or does it go to the general?
Okay, so it does go to my ministry, or to this ministry that I will be doing. What they do is it goes into a fund at General Baptist, and it gets earmarked with my name. And so then I get a list of how many shares I have, how much is in there. So if there's a need and there's some extra money in there, say something happens to my housing on campus, then I'll pull some of that money out of there. So it will go towards this ministry that I am doing. Yeah, so that's how that works. Okay. Anything else? All right, well, thank you very much for having me. Oh, sure. So Faith Home, they do get a small portion of Unified Giving. Unified Giving goes to all of the locations, but it goes for certain things. It's earmarked for exactly what it can be spent on. Faith Home is mainly funded through their child sponsorships. So child sponsorships are $25 each a month, and that money goes to help pay for the major Faith Home costs. So. Mm-hmm. So it's separate. So Unified Giving does go a little bit to the field of Honduras, but not specifically to run Faith Home. So Faith Home is through those child sponsorships. So just like missionaries get sponsors, the kids get sponsors as well. So their sponsorships is what runs Faith Home. Okay. So, how do people get, so you're saying that there's 50 sons in just Faith Home? That's yes. What that is? Okay. So they have a program which is kind of like our DCFS. It's called DNAF. And that's how the children are placed at Faith Home. And so they're removed from their families for neglect, abuse, any type of where they have to get involved and feel like the child needs removed from their family. So the government is involved in the placing of the children, but that's the extent of it. Now, Faith Home used to do all of their schooling on campus, but what they found is the kids really weren't prepared for normal life outside of the gates of Faith Home because they really never left the gates of Faith Home. And so they really were sheltered and they were really struggling when they got off campus. So what they tried was sending them out to a private school. And they found it was really beneficial for the students to be off campus for part of the day. But in Honduras, schooling's only half day. So then the other half of the day, they come to the school on campus and get some of that extra tutoring and help. You're welcome.
What is their current faculty staff, including the doctor and just the caregivers?
Okay, sure. So the missionaries on campus is Christina Massey, and she runs the day-to-day operations of Faith Home. And there's Rodney and Teresa Walls. So Rodney does the church planting, and Teresa is a nurse that helps at the clinic. And then there's Dr. Sharon, who's on staff, and she's the doctor of the clinic. Mr. Eder is the educational director, and so he is over all of the students' education, and he is the one who runs that tutoring program, and he stays in contact with all of the schools. So he's got a pretty big job. And then they have Pastor Miguel, who is one of the house parents for the transition, but then he's kind of like the lead pastor that helps with all of the associations. So he works really close with Rodney. There's Mauricio, who is kind of like the groundskeeper, maintenance. He does all of that kind of stuff. So I don't think I missed anybody. So that would be 7, counting the missionaries and nationals.
You all don't eat, you don't have cooks and all that?
So the children, they do. They do have a kitchen that does their lunch. And so there is a cook on staff. I've never been down there for a meal. So missionaries do their own meals. We're not part of that meal program that they have. But they do feed the children lunch together, but then breakfast and supper is in their houses as a family. Yes. That is. And off the top of my head, I am not sure how many house parents. It kind of changes sometimes, but I think when I was down there this summer, they had 6 sets inside and 1 set outside of the gates. Yep, so those are included too. Yeah, and there's a lot going on down there for what they have. So, but it's a great team. You know, a team effort between the nationals and the missionaries, and so. Yes. Yes, it's very much needed. Absolutely. So, and sometimes if they can't find a place for the kid, they go back to their parent. So, absolutely, it's a huge need.
Are there any other churches or denominations and things in Honduras that provide this, or?
There are, but Faith Home's very unique. So, some of the other ones that offer children's home, they just don't have the resources to have the quality medical care, be able to send them out to private schools and have the additional academic help on campus. And they definitely don't have a psychologist on staff. And so that's kind of a yes and no question. Yes, there are some other children's homes out there, but they're definitely not comparable to Faith Home. I personally haven't visited any of the others, but I have talked to people who have been, and they said some of them that are run through the churches are pretty decent conditions, but some of them, the children's homes that are local, are things from horror movies, that they're absolutely terrible.
I just wondered if there was any, you guys were the only one. I didn't know.
Yep. There are other ones down there, just they're different. They are not. So I've been to several of the ones that are pretty close, probably within like an hour radius from Faith Home. I visited several. I know there's a lot more. But there are some that are a lot farther south in the mountains. So I know Rodney gets to those on occasion, but it's a very long trip because the roads in Honduras are not the greatest. And so I don't actually have a number for how many General Baptist churches, but I know there are quite a few.
Is that where, I remember they were talking about doing some Bibles and things, and
So they do. So again, Rodney's over the church planting, and then Pastor Miguel is kind of the lead pastor of their association. And so they do a lot of training with the pastors. So they maybe find people in their congregation who are interested in being a pastor, and they work with them a lot, have them do some studies and see if they really are, qualified to maybe lead a church, and they mentor them. So that's how they kind of get their pastors for their churches, is through the local congregations and working with Rodney and Pastor Miguel.
The people of the area there, I mean, if they're not Christian, what are they? Just, they don't worship anything, or hostile towards Christians?
There are definitely groups that are hostile towards Christians. There's a lot of gang activity, and I feel like that's probably where some of that hostility comes from. A lot of people down there maybe claim to be Christian, but don't go to church, and kind of like here in America. I mean, I think there's a large percentage who say they're Christian, but don't really have beliefs and don't really know who Jesus is. There's definitely some Catholic influence down there, our General Baptist churches, but a lot of people, I mean, they just don't go. They just don't go anywhere. One, transportation is a big issue, and that's why having all these little churches in the villages is so important, because most of the people walk there to get to church. So, anything else?
Do the other ones have to be funded like that with the shares and especially on the rest of the staff and things?
So the funding for the nationals is all through the faith home, like the child sponsorships, but then the missionaries all get their shares.
You're going down there for a year, is what you're saying?
It's a 4-year contract.
So that the shares that are provided will take care of your needs, I guess, for the 4 years.
Yes.
Okay, so it's just a 4-year commitment when you do the shares or whatever.
Yes. And so basically what will happen is at the end of the 4 years, we'll discuss on whether I'm going to sign another contract or not. And I figure only God knows that at this point in time. I don't foresee myself coming back at the end of 4 years, but 4 years is a long time. And then each time, once a year, I'll come back home and I'll travel to some churches. And so I would definitely keep churches updated. But if you commit to do shares and at any point in time you're not able to do it, you just let headquarters know. And so, say at the end of the 4 years, you're like, well, I don't want to do it anymore or something. I mean, that is an option. So, but of course, my hope would be that, as part of this ministry, that people would be able to continue doing that. Yeah, so it really goes to the mission field of Honduras more than Faith Home specifically. The Unified does.
Okay. And it's something that the church plant is probably outside of the
Yeah.
outside of there.
Okay, well, thank you all for having me. I appreciate you letting me come.